A lot of pointed questions following your very well received presentation here today. In particular, there was a lot of interest as to whether asphaltene limits will find their way into ISO 8217 parameters.
I don't see that happening, and the reason being, probably why the question comes up, is that people are concerned about stability and they understand about the asphaltenes coming out of solution when we have a stability issue. The thing is that there's no correlation between asphaltenes and the risk of having an unstable fuel. You can have a high asphaltenic content and the fuel will be perfectly stable, and you can have a low asphaltenic content and the fuel will be unstable. So there's no point in adding it as a limit in ISO, because high asphaltenic fuels burn well in the engines are designed for it, and it will not protect against instability.
Do you envisage bacterial contamination in low sulfur fuel oils as being a particular problem going forward when it comes to blending of fuels?
I don't see the risk of having a bacterial contamination as having any link to the low sulfur fuels and the blending there. Where you see bacteria coming into fuel is typically if you have a high water content and you have a contamination. We do not see bacteria typically in bunker fuels. It's something that happens in storage tanks on board vessels. In order for bacteria to grow and thrive, they need food and they need water. So if you take that part of that out, you will also eliminate the risk of having bacterial contamination. So frequent draining, getting the water out of the tanks, that will simply prevent the bacteria from growing. You can of course apply biocides, so you could do it on a preventive basis, or you could do it as a firefighting means if you do have bacterial growth in your tanks. The important thing to note is that when you clean out of using biocides, if you have bacteria there, you will kill them, and they will be going through the system with the fuel when they're dead. And that will still block filters, cause sludging, smelly bacterial sludge there. So if biocides are to be applied, it's better to do it on a preventive basis, where you do it every time you bunker, you put in some biocide there. But the easiest way is really just to make sure you do not have water in your tanks.
An important consideration for owners and operators as we home in on 2020 is cleaning the tanks, and in the marketplace there's all sorts of claims being made around chemicals, and they're promising treatment of asphaltenes and being able to burn the sludges and so on. How do you regard the claims that are out there, and what is the best approach in this area?
There are various approaches. What we do know is that we need to clean out the sludge. Over time, heavy fuels generate a sludge in the bottom of the tanks. It's high sulfur, it has cat fines, water, sediments in there, and you have no interest in getting that through your system because it will impact your filters and your separators. And if you just bunker a low sulfur fuel on top of it, it will contaminate it with a high sulfur content, and you may end up being non-compliant and engine inlet because the sulfur content is above the 0.50 limit, even though you bunkered compliant fuel. So it's important to have that bottom sludge taken out of the tanks before you load the low sulfur products there. There are various options mentioned in the industry. You can go in manually and clean out the sludge, but that is also a time-consuming and a difficult process to do that. You can also gradually flush it out by either bunkering a gas oil or a low sulfur product to slowly, bit by bit, dissolving it and taking it through the system. There will be filter activity, there will be extra separator activity during that process when you clean it out. So that is something that you need to be prepared for depending on the strategy you apply. I know there are also additives in the market claiming to be able to clean it out, so you can operate on high sulfur heavy fuel oil and apply those additives, and that will bit by bit dissolving the bottom sludge and take it through the system, and then thereby cleaning out the tanks. I don't know if they work, I do not have experience with it, but I do know that they're out there.
There were a lot of issues when it came to fuels and fuel quality in the Houston area, in Singapore, I believe in Panama as well. What's your take on what actually happened there, and what prospect of repetition?
The industry does not fully know what happened, and whether we will ever know the full story is doubtful. It's sad that we will not, if we do not get the full story, because that's the only way to really fully understand what actually happened and to effectively go in and put up preventive measures. A lot of companies performed in-depth analysis on a very, very wide scale, including ourselves. Unfortunately, we did not find the culprit. We found all sorts of things, but we could find that also in other fuels not causing problems. What happened? Yeah, it's really a good question. There's no doubt that there was something in those fuels that caused problems to some vessels, not all vessels, but some vessels. And the legal game is just about to start now. In some of the cases, we could see that in the media. What the industry would really benefit from is more transparency, that we would understand better, more knowledge sharing, more data sharing of what actually went on. It's the only way to fully get to the bottom of it, because whoever in the industry that knows, and someone in the supply chain would always know what we're in those specific fuels, especially considering the scale of it, but we'd probably never be informed about that. And that is really what we need. We need that transparency so we can kind of learn from it and prevent it from happening in the future. Having said that, I do not see a link between the cases we saw last year and 2020. The fuels that were causing problems last year were all high sulfur fuels. There were no low sulfur fuels involved in that, and there were no chemicals being picked up that would indicate a deliberate dumping of waste chemicals into those fuels causing these issues. So there is nothing that would indicate this being a precursor to 2020 and what we can expect there.
And finally, Charlotte, we're talking at the midpoint of day one here at Riviera's Sulphur Cap 2020 Conference Awards and Exhibition. What are your impressions?
I always enjoy these conferences. It's very well representation of the industry. You have a very lively debate, good networking opportunity, and the way the conference is run engages the audience a lot, getting that lively debates going. That's a great pleasure to be here.